Welcome to the Charter Oak Chess Club's YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be going over a classical game that I played at the 27th Annual Northeast Open held in Stamford, Connecticut. Enjoy. So the game starts out with pawn to d4, pawn to d5, pawn to c4, the Queen's Gambit. Pawn takes on c4, pawn to e4, pawn to e5, and now d5, and this is a mistake. Most people would play instead knight to f3, and black would capture, and then white will simply capture back these pawns as black develops. But instead, white decides, hey, if I can keep this center, and black's pawns are kind of, we've got these double pawns here, looks like it should be very simple to capture back this pawn, and we have more control over the center. Unfortunately, black is currently up a pawn, and we are able to hold on to this. If not forever, we're going to hold on to it long enough to get some counterplay. So knight to f6, knight to c3, and now here we played pawn to b5, which is a bit of a strange move if we haven't seen this position before, but luckily we had. The idea is that the knight is unable to take this pawn on b5 because we will take the center pawn, and in an opening, center pawns are more important than side pawns. And from here, white's position is completely busted because if they play something like queen to e2, which could normally be played in these types of positions, we get bishop to b4 check. They can't defend with their bishop because we'll take it, so they'd have to move the knight. And now that the knight is pinned and our knight is hanging on e4, we're going to use our queen to take on d5, and we've gone up 2 pawns. And then in another line, let's say that after b5, white takes, black takes, and now they play bishop takes on c4. White has got their pawns back, even material. This knight and pawn look a little exposed. So what can black do here? Well, black can play knight takes on f2 and get a fork. And if the king tries to take back, now we have queen to h4, and we pick the bishop back up. And when we pick the bishop back up, we also stop this knight from taking on c6. So anyway, white tries to win back this pawn immediately. It's not going to work out. So instead, white has to think of a plan. Some people will play bishop to g5. They'll play any kind of development move like knight to f3. But in this position, white decided to play queen c2. And I've never seen this move, but it makes sense, right? The queen is guarding the pawn on e4, so the knight can apply pressure to b5. So here we played bishop to b4, but we're going to look at one line because I think it's a lot of fun, and that is pawn to c6. So if pawn to c6 is played, they continue to hold on to the pawn on b5, and if white takes, black takes, and white decides, I'm going to take the pawn now, it seems that they've gotten away with it because the queen is now guarding e4. But there is a way to play some tactics here and to win a lot of material. So pause the video and try to figure out what is black's best option here. All right, so the best option here is to play queen to a5 check and get a fork. If the knight comes back, we're now going to make use of the queen being on a weird square. So knight to d4, let's attack the queen. The queen has to hold on to the pawn because of the pin. So the queen has to go to b1. Now there's a few moves that are fine, bishop to b4 being one of them. But by far the most fun move here, knight to d5. A crazy move. Obviously the knight can't take, but the pawn can take. And if it does, black has to find bishop to f5, attacking the queen, and the queen is completely trapped. So instead, white has to see that play bishop to d2, and now knight to b4, and we have a fork coming against the king and the rook. So a crazy position, for sure, coming out of c6. But we didn't play that. We played bishop to b4, and now some quick moves. Okay, bishop comes out, pawn to c6. Rook comes out, they're controlling the open file. I want to get my queen off of the open file. So go over here where you can defend the pawn and maybe even defend the bishop. Capture, 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 and develop, pin, break the pin, castle, castle. And when the dust settles, it's actually a very normal looking position, and black has held on to an extra pawn. But the game's not done yet. So how do we win this structure? Well, let's play rook to c8 to support our pawn in c4. White plays h3, and this is good news for me because white currently has the bishop pair. But with this move h3, I find a very easy way to get rid of that bishop pair. So first we take, and then the bishop takes back. And now from here, pawn to b4, attacking the bishop. The bishop has to move, and now knight to d4 with a fork, and we see how this rook on c8 is guarding the c4 pawn. Also, it's worth noting that the queen can't go anywhere on the third rank, so we're going to capture this bishop, and we're also going to break down the castle. So that's what happens. We get check, they take back, and now it's actually a very difficult part in the game. Black is only winning by 1 pawn, and white is starting to put some pressure on these pawns on the A, B, and C file. So we play c3, bishop goes here, rook to c7, and in this position, rook to c7 is not the way to go about it. So white is attacking this pawn twice, and there's no way to hold on to all 3 of these pawns. So what black should do instead is say, hey, we have a weakness on the castle, so let's start moving this knight, moving this queen, and start attacking that castle right now, because they have to take one of their pawns, and they're going to have to use their rooks to do that. So while their rooks go one way, our queen will go towards the castle. But we tried to hold on to it. Capture, capture. Rook comes over here. Rook goes over here. Rook comes up, and we can see that there's just no way to hold on to all of this. So knight goes to h5. Rook comes out. And now pawn to h6, which was a little slow. There was a bit of time pressure now. This was a classical game, but we had to reach move a certain amount of moves so that we get more time on the clock. So we had to hit 40 moves. Queen comes to a5. The idea of h6, by the way, with the queen and the rooks coming out, we didn't want to get back rank mated. So we just played h6 as an escape square, but we could have gone knight f4 right away. Queen to f6, capture, capture, capture. And in this position, we played rook to d8, which is the best move. There is no point in trying to capture this rook because we're going to win the f3 pawn. But then the queen just takes, and then we take back, and then the queen actually takes on e5, so the material is still even, and we can continue to grab pieces. But again, everything is going to be even when the dust settles. So taking the rook makes no sense. Instead, rook to d8, and now white can take on a7, but that would be a very bad move because now we play check, and this game is completely busted. So if the king goes to h2, queen takes on f3, and it's mate. If the king goes to g2 here, we're going to slide queen over here now, and it's mate. Bishop can block, and now checkmate. So white saw this coming, so they didn't take the pawn. They moved their rook back, and now from here, rook to d6, queen takes, and now it's actually white that is up 1 pawn, but the position is even. It's a dead draw. King to h7, queen to c5, rook to e6. So the idea is we want to play with this rook. This rook is under attack. The pawn is under attack. Let's move the rook over here so that I can move my queen finally. King to g2, queen to h4, and king to h2 loses the drawn position, and now black has an advantage, even though white is up a pawn. It's worth noting that even though they're up this pawn, this pass pawn, there's nothing they can do with that, because to push this pass pawn, we can just bring the queen and rook and stop that, and if the more pieces they bring to guard this pass pawn, the more pieces we can go to check the king, either get a perpetual, or maybe even checkmate. So we got to keep an eye on the a pawn, but we don't have to worry about it too much. So king plays h2, and we play knight to f4, and now we're threatening to take h3, and then capture, check, king moves, check, and we capture another pawn. Position, the material's even, but we are attacking the king. So let's go back here. This is a draw right here. What can white do to try to defend? They have 2 moves they can play. So take a moment, and instead of playing king to h2, what could white play in this position? So 2 ideas. One is to play queen to c7. And with both of these ideas, we know it's going to be knight, we know there's going to be rook, and we know there's going to be queen coming in. So from here, if they play check, take, take, and now they want to play rook over here so that they can continue taking pawns. My opponent could have found rook to c6, and that stops the rook from getting to g6. And then the other option, which again goes with the same plan of we know it's going to be here, take, and the rook coming in. They could have played rook to g1. So if we do this, take, now they just play this, and again, the rook can't really come to g6. And any way we try to play this with this rook on g1, it's just going to be bad news. It's not going to work out. So, if we go over here, and the king goes to the side, take, yes, black wins a pawn, but it really is no big deal because, again, when the dust settles, 3 pawns, and white is actually slightly better here because black doesn't have that rook, so they're not going to be able to checkmate the king, and white can start pushing this pawn. So any of these plans, there's 1 or 2 more options, but they're slightly better for black. But queen to c8, rook to g1, any of these plans would have worked, but my opponent did not catch that. And again, we're on move 30. We spent a lot of time in the opening because it was a little crazy. So we were getting a little bit of time pressure to reach that move 40. Knight to f4, capture, check, king over, check, king over, take. And from this position, white plays queen to e3. Now it's tempting just to take the queen and the pawn, but will that be enough to win? We still have to worry about this pawn promoting. Yeah, they're double pawns, but the king is on that side, should be able to protect it. So we went with check, king goes over, and now what would you play if you were black in this position? Because white is actually doing a very good job defending everything with their queen, and there's no way for this rook to kind of come in. So what is a plan that black can think of here to get back in the game? All right, so there's only one winning idea, and that idea is rook to a6. We are going to go after the pawn, and of course, there are 2 ways that white can defend against that, but it does not matter how they defend because the plan is to play rook to a4 and go after this e4 pawn. And there's just nothing that white can do against it. They are pinned, so they won't be able to push this pawn. If they play something like queen to f3, let's see, we can play rook takes on e4 check. And even though it looks like both of these are hanging, they're not, right? The queen is defending the rook. The queen doesn't have time to take because they're in check. And if the king steps away, which he'll have to do, then we'll take the queen. So rook to a4 causes a lot of problems. White played king to d2, just trying to get the king out of the way. And from here, we had rook check on d4. The king moves away again. And now from here, we had queen to g6. If they defended, we would go for checkmate. We'd start playing checks. Like if they push the pawn here, we could play check. And the king goes up and then check. And the king goes here, check. King goes here, check. And we just walk with the ladder method to get checkmate. They play a4 to stop that idea. You can't play the ladder mate now because the rook is guarding that a4 pawn. And from here, we take with the rook, not the queen. So we take with the rook. The queen moves over. We have a discovered check on the king. The queen moves back. And now, very easy way to finish the game. Rook to c4. The queen is pinned. So the queen cannot take the rook. The king has to stay close to the queen to guard it. So they played king to d2. And from here, we pin again with rook to d4. The queen cannot move out of the way because it's check. And from this position, the queen easily stops the pawn from promoting. And it's just an easy win. So my opponent resigned after the pin. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to get new chess content every week. Have you played a great game of chess recently? Feel free to email it to us and we'll go through it during our next video.